90,000 people inhale all at once. A world-class striker bursts through the gap, eyes fixed entirely on the goalkeeper. The crowd rises, sensing the inevitable. But look back at the defensive line. One stride forward, a synchronized, silent step from a perfectly calm back four. On the far touchline, an assistant raises the flag. The whistle blows, and the entire attack vanishes into thin air. That single, devastating step is never down to luck. It is a meticulous plan. It is a trap set long before the pass was ever considered. Space is the ultimate currency on a football pitch. When you take that space away, you do more than just survive an opponent's attack. You turn defense into an instant weapon. A perfectly executed trap is a complete ambush. Win a cheap turnover high up the pitch, and your team is already running the other way. The most legendary sides in history did not just sit deep and suffer under pressure. They learned to conquer territory with their feet, with their minds, and with perfect timing, rather than relying solely on last-ditch tackles. This dark, tactical art is forged from three unbroken links in a single chain. First, there must be intense physical pressure on the passer, forcing their head to drop and shrinking their decision-making window to a fraction of a second. Second, the defending team must hold a rigorously compact shape, keeping the lines aggressively close together. Third, and most famous, is the synchronized step forward. If even one of those links breaks, the trap melts into a disastrous one-on-one. But when kept tight, you can erase an entire attacking philosophy with one collective stride. Picture a team that is entirely contained within about 25 meters of grass. From the deepest defender all the way to the highest forward, the distance is suffocatingly small. It breathes and moves like an accordion, shifting across the pitch as one solid block. Through ball lanes get impossibly thin. The pass might still travel at the exact same speed, but the window to thread a perfect ball gets microscopic. That physical compression is the foundation. It is exactly why compact teams can step forward with total arrogance. A typical killer through ball travels between 20 and 25 meters in distance. At the ferocious pace top professionals strike it, the ball spends roughly 1.2 to 1.6 seconds in transit. That tiny window of time is where elite defenders truly live. They do not watch the runner making the sprint. Instead, they read the subtle bodily cue on the passer. They step precisely as the boot swings through the ball. If the line moves as a single organism, the desperate runner arrives into completely thin air. In 1990, the lawmakers of the game inadvertently sharpened this tactical blade. The offside rule was officially changed to state that an attacker sitting entirely level with the second-last defender is perfectly onside. No longer could a defender save a broken trap by merely leaving a trailing toe behind. This meant backlines had to be cleaner, sharper, and completely unified. A lazy half-step backwards now kept a lightning-fast striker onside. The modern era of pressing, combined with that ruthless law, turned stepping up into an absolute science. Long before that legal tweak, the blueprint was already being drawn in Amsterdam. Under the visionary Rinus Michels, Ajax played a daring high line and pressed as a relentless, coordinated pack. Total football was not just an attacking slogan, it was a defensive squeeze. As the midfield press bit down on the ball, the back line confidently stepped up. Runners constantly met an invisible, infuriating wall of offside. Ajax used this suffocating space control to win the European Cup 3 glorious years in a row, from 1971 to 1973. Then came the definitive defensive masterclass, draped elegantly in red and black. Arrigo Sacchi took over Milan and mandated a strict 25 meters from his back four to his strikers. In and out of possession, the block moved with a terrifying synchronization. Franco Baresi orchestrated his legendary defensive unit, triggering the step on an invisible, silent cue. When the opposition passer dipped their head to strike the ball, the red and black lines surged forward in total harmony. Saki understood that the trap did not originate in the defense. It actually began with the very first press high up the pitch. This philosophy of total compression suffocated the continent, yielding back-to-back European Cups in 1989 and 1990. They proved to the world that spatial dominance and impeccable timing won infinitely more battles than sliding tackles ever could. If you want to witness this art form at its absolute peak, travel back to Athens in 1994. Milan faced a spectacular Barcelona side boasting an iconic front line. The names were famous, and their attacking runs were historically perfect. Yet Milan held a brutally strict line while hounding every touch of the ball carrier. Again and again, Barcelona's elite runners sprinted enthusiastically into dead space. The assistant's flag rose over and over. Barcelona's rhythm shattered, and Milan cruised to a stunning 4-0 victory. Across the Channel in England, Arsenal turned the offside step into a cultural symbol of dominance. Manager George Graham drilled his back four until they functioned like a precision metronome. Tony Adams, Steve Bold, Lee Dixon, and Nigel Winterburn moved as a single living entity. In the 1990-91 season, their mastery of the step was so absolute they let in a staggering 18 goals in 42 league matches. That is a jaw-dropping 0.43 goals conceded per game. The routine was mesmerizing to watch. Adams would raise a commanding arm. The four men took one synchronized stride. The immense danger was instantly neutralized. High up in the North Bank, the crowd would affectionately sing 1-0 to the Arsenal. The sound matched the visual perfectly. A calm defensive line, an isolated striker, a raised flag, a simple free kick. And then the immediate, devastating counterattack sprinting the other way. Decades later, Diego Simeone taught a completely different kind of patience, balancing his side on a tactical knife edge. His iconic Atletico Madrid did not just sit deep and suffer near their own penalty box. Instead, they inched up together, collectively creeping higher as the ball was shuttled sideways by the opposition. They deliberately baited the straight, vertical pass into a heavily crowded central lane. Then, the moment the pass was played, they snapped forward in unison. It was a pure ambush. In the 2013-14 season, this aggressive, creeping strategy was utterly impenetrable. Atletico conceded just 26 goals in 38 domestic matches, averaging a mere 0.68 per game. Their ultimate reward was a historic league title against all odds. The subtle creep and the violent snap forward turned immense defensive pressure into hard-earned championship points. Today, modern highlines look incredibly bold, almost reckless to the untrained eye. But they do not inflate risk. They merely relocate it. You routinely see center backs standing 5 to 10 meters inside the attacking half during settled possession. Fullbacks tuck narrowly inside to smother counters, while the goalkeeper sweeps aggressively behind them. The very first hint of an opponent shaping for a killer pass triggers a ferocious jump press on the ball, or a unified collective step by the defense. Most often it requires both at exactly the same time. This modern approach is not a wild gamble. It is a highly calculated trade. Managers swap the chaos of open space foot races for the heavily controlled variables of timing and ball pressure. Those are elements you can actively train on a damp Tuesday morning. You can rehearse the pressing cues. You can drill the step until it becomes pure muscle memory. Highline defending is simply the act of turning the beautiful chaos of the game into a predictable, repeatable pattern. The true dark art of this tactic lies in the lure. The absolute best backlines actively bait the striker's run before shutting it down. A center back might take a tiny, deceptive half-step backwards. The striker senses the weakness, points to the space, and initiates the sprint. But in the exact split second the passer's head dips to deliver the ball, the entire defensive line rockets forward. The runner bursts into completely empty offside air, totally isolated, while the ball trickles harmlessly to a calm defender. Think of the offside trap not as a desperate defensive measure, but as an aggressive transition move. Spring it perfectly, and you instantly restart the game with the ball entirely on your terms, high up the pitch. The casual observer in the stadium only sees an assistant referee raising a flag, but the defending team sees an immediate, golden platform to launch a deadly attack against a completely disorganized opponent. If you are deeply enjoying the way these tactical ghosts of the past still shape the beautiful game we watch today, you might find a home right here. We tell hand-drawn, story-first football tales every single week. Subscribe to Ink Pitch to keep the fire burning, and let us get back to the pitch. In the modern era, the razor's edge of the trap is sharper than ever before. At the 2022 World Cup, semi-automated offside technology arrived, changing the geometry of the game forever. Calls are instantaneous, and the margins of error now live in absolute centimeters. A single fullback dropping late breaks the magic spell entirely. Stepping up without coordinated pressure on the ball is no longer a viable tactic. It is just naive gambling in front of calibrated cameras. Because the margins are totally invisible to the human eye, elite teams must relentlessly drill their cadence and their pressing cues. They have to land that collective step inside that brutal 1.2 to 1.6 second window of the pass. The rhythm is trained day after day. The eyes are trained to ignore the runner and watch the ball. The step becomes pure, unspoken instinct, but it was painstakingly built in the mud of the training ground. Watch closely how top defenders read the cues around them. If the opposing passer looks up, scanning the horizon, the defensive line sternly holds its ground. The moment the passer drops their head to strike through the ball, the line violently surges up. If the nearest pressing midfielder successfully cuts off the passing lane, the center backs read the change in foot shape and adjust instantly. Everything is perfectly linked. 11 players sharing one heartbeat. If the midfield pressure arrives late, the trap stays safely in the holster. There is a remarkably simple, unbreakable rule that transcends every era and every tactical evolution of football. Press first, then step. Never, ever the reverse. A high line deployed without ferocious pressure on the ball carrier is simply a dare for a fast striker to score easily. But with intense, suffocating pressure, that high line becomes a steel trap that bites shut, leaving the opposition completely helpless. Of course, the high line trap has deeply effective tactical cousins. Some historically great defenses do not rely on stepping high and risking the space behind their shoulders. They sit in a mid-block, intensely compressing the space and shuffling side to side without ever committing to a massive forward surge. The ultimate goal remains exactly the same. Starve the creative pass, close the physical gap, force the attacker into a terrible choice. Not every defensive masterpiece requires an offside flag. The letter of law 11 has continued to radically evolve and shift since that landmark change in 1990. The deeply complex interpretations of interfering with play, reacting to rebounds, and distinguishing a deliberate play of the ball have been rewritten and heavily debated countless times. You always have to judge a great defensive trap within the strict context of its specific era. Yet the core philosophical idea remains untouched. Precise timing and aggressive pressure will always make space disappear. Let us step back to the golden era of Ajax to truly appreciate that very first blueprint. Their revolutionary high line held its ground near the halfway mark. Midfielders hunted the man on the ball with a coordinated ferocity that was previously unseen. As soon as the passer was cast under a dark shadow of pressure, the back line took that unified stride forward. It looked incredibly brave to the watching world, but it was coldly calculated. Opposing runners repeatedly sprinted into an invisible net they could not possibly comprehend. Now return to Milan, but this time really feel the agonizing lack of space they imposed on the pitch. Exactly 25 meters separating the deepest defender from the highest forward. The entire team block slid up and down the grass like a single, unbreakable piece of heavy machinery. A winger, desperately looking for a channel to run into, found absolutely nothing. A world-class striker saw green grass, made his move, and tasted the bitter sound of an offside whistle. It was not just defending, it was pure geometry played with metal studs. The unmistakable echoes of Arsenal's defensive drill could be heard in every stadium across England. On the secluded training grounds, the sharp blast of the coach's whistle set the uncompromising beat. Under the stadium lights, the true cue was the dynamic between the rolling ball and the eager runner. Those four famous defenders held a perfectly straight, invisible seam across the pitch. Their boots moved in the exact same rhythm. The physical step forward was tiny, but conceptually, it was absolutely everything. Atletico's defensive creep was aesthetically different, but it sang the exact same miserable tune to opposing attackers. They let you comfortably believe you had space in front of them. You passed sideways once, and they silently clicked up a meter. You passed sideways again, and they took another meter. Then, completely lulled into a false sense of security, you attempted the forward pass, and the trap viciously bit down. You were either hopelessly offside or instantly swarmed by three aggressive players. Either way, Atletico took the ball. The role of the goalkeeper in this delicate dance cannot be overstated. In the modern game, the evolution of the sweeper-keeper turns the high line from a terrifying prospect into a sane, reliable tactic. With explosive pace off their line and aggressive starting positions, the keeper acts as the ultimate safety net, covering any ball chipped lazily over the top. That aggressive sweeping is what ultimately frees the defensive line to hold their ground much higher up the pitch and to step with total conviction. Even the most structurally sound traps utilize the dark art of decoys. A seasoned center back might drop half a step on purpose, feigning exhaustion or poor positioning. The opposing striker points frantically and launches into a full sprint. In that exact fraction of a second, the midfield press darkens the passer's view, and the entire defensive line bolts forward. The striker turns back, throwing their arms wide in frustration as the flag goes up. Offside. Ball turned over in an instant. Behind the tactical chalkboard, there is always the deeply human element. One single defender reacting a fraction of a second late ruins the entire beautiful picture. That is exactly why elite teams endlessly drill their body shape, their hip angles, and their verbal calls. It relies on quiet words in the chaos of a match, a subtle hand signal, a shared, almost telepathic feel for the exact moment the ball will be struck. The defensive line does not argue or hesitate, it simply moves. Tactics boards often show sterile arrows and neatly shaded zones. But down on the pitch, this craft sounds like heavy breathing and the violent crunch of studs on turf. You hear the sharp, commanding shout from the captain. You physically feel the team shrink the pitch and step forward as one. It is violent choreography, not random chaos. The absolute best defensive lines in history look entirely calm only because they have practiced this exact movement 1,000 times in the shadows. Ultimately, the offside trap is not about humiliating the opponent. It is about imposing order on a chaotic game. It turns a wildly dangerous counterattack into a mundane, simple restart. It keeps heavy legs remarkably fresh late in the game. It completely eliminates the need for lung-busting, desperate chases back toward your own goal. Over the span of a grueling 90-minute match, that saved energy matters immensely. Brilliant managers across every era leaned heavily on this invisible weapon for exactly that reason. Critics and pundits sometimes boldly claim that high lines are inherently reckless. But here is the ultimate counter-argument. A desperate foot race between a defender and a rapid striker in open space is a complete coin flip. However, a perfectly timed step combined with ferocious pressure on the ball is a highly repeatable drill. You can coach a drill. You can meticulously rehearse it. You can implicitly trust it when the lights shine the brightest on Cup final night. The historical records and the exact defensive numbers will inevitably shift across different leagues, different decades, and different eras of the game. Statistical sources might count defensive actions a bit differently over time, but the underlying foundational principle of the trap never bends. Press the ball first, then step forward together. Make the window of opportunity impossibly small. Take their precious space away, and you take away all their hope. From the dusty chalkboards of the past to the semi-automated, camera-calibrated lines of today, the grand idea endures. Ajax taught the world the squeeze. Milan perfected the suffocating block. Arsenal set the ruthless metronome. Atletico mastered the slow, agonizing ambush. One synchronized stride forward, and an entire attack simply disappears. That is the true chess of space in football. That is exactly why we still talk about it with such reverence. If this story brought back why you fell in love with the game, subscribe to Ink Pitch. We tell football's greatest stories, entirely hand-drawn. There are more legends, more unforgettable nights, and more quiet, brilliant tricks like this one waiting on our channel. Drop a like if this tactical tale hit the spot, and stay with us for the next great story by the fire.